friends. I'm Karen, and this is the Family Food for Moms podcast. We're talking about inspiration for family cooking and dining. So, we've talked before about unusual budget ideas or spending less in the kitchen. So, I want to revisit that with a few more ideas that I may have mentioned before, but it's always good to be reminded, right? So, we're talking about saving money in the kitchen. So cooking in bulk is definitely a good thing, although I do find it a little bit overwhelming to always cook in bulk. So I'll choose certain things that I know freeze well and that I'll use again to cook in bulk. And then getting the meat and the vegetables in bulk often saves money. Plus, somehow if you divide your meal into two, you get by with a little bit less for each meal instead of having a little extra and it going to waste. So doubling up on a meal, whether it's a soup, a stew, or a casserole, a lasagna, all of those freeze well for another meal. Also, I think I've mentioned before, if you have a meal with some leftover, instead of just putting it into the fridge, make an actual meal for a lunch for your hubby or somebody who needs a work lunch. A complete meal. So have the meat and the vegetables and the starch all in there, ready to warm up and eat for a lunch in the future, rather than just putting odds and ends in the fridge that may go to waste. When I'm freezing something with rice, I often put the meat and sauce on top of the rice, because when you reheat it, the rice can get a bit hard, unless you use the microwave, of course, but we use the oven quite often. Also, you can reheat in a pan with a tiny bit of water and a lid. That is a nice way to reheat something in a glass dish. Glass dish is far superior to plastic ones. I'm sure you agree. So that is a similar point to using your leftovers creatively. So using your leftovers to repurpose into a new meal. For example, if you've had roast chicken and you have leftover chicken, shred it and make a chicken noodle soup or a chicken broth with some vegetables in it. Then you get a whole new meal out of it again, instead of just putting the odd bits into the fridge. So cooking in bulk, buying in bulk are well-known tips for saving. For me, it helps to do complete shops as well. Whether I'm going to the grocery store or ordering online. Sure, I'm out of breath for running up the stairs. Sorry about that. So I like to make sure that we have everything for the meals we want, because otherwise you're going to need another shopping trip and then you're going to waste money. So make sure you have a vegetable to go with each meal. Make sure you have all the odd things like sour cream to add to your stroganoff. Make sure you have the staples that sometimes run out: butter, cheese, milk, etc. So make sure that you think through each meal as you make your shopping list or do your online shopping. And then you don't need to go back for some small item. I enjoy shopping online because I can think as I go. And when I think of something I need, instead of having to make a shopping list, I just add it to my cart. So every time someone says we're running out of this, or I think of something I'll need for a meal, I just add it. And then it's so much easier to finish that shopping at that time. So bulk shopping, looking for things on special, things that cost less per pound if it's in bulk, lamb chops, beef mince, any of those things are great options for buying in bulk. Then planning your meals, obviously looking what's in your pantry, looking what's in your freezer, planning around those things, and then seeing what's on sale perhaps and buying those in bulk so that you have them in your freezer or pantry for the future. And then making sure that you plan your meals around that. I'll often make a list of the proteins that are in my freezer or pantry. So whether it's tins of lentils or sausages in the freezer, roast chickens in the freezer, meat for stroganoff, tuna in tins in the cupboard, and then I'll plan my meals around those, just quickly listing them out according to the proteins, and then I'll add the vegetables or the starch or whatever else, tortillas that are needed to the shopping list for those things. Then using lower cost proteins, I try to balance out the more expensive proteins like lamb, whether it's for a lamb stew or roast lamb. I find that more expensive, balancing it out with a cheaper cut of pork or some chicken breasts or ground beef is cheaper than some other kinds of beef. Beef stroganoff is quite cheap. Beef sausages can be cheap. So just balancing out expensive proteins if you're going to have them. Fish is also a very expensive protein. Then having the cheaper ones in the same week so that your budget is not stretched too much. Canned tuna is a good way to balance the budget as well if you've spent too much in a week. Then stretching your meat with other ingredients, like adding vegetables, adding lentils, adding beans. Grated carrot and zucchini are delicious in bolognese and help to stretch it and add some more nutrients. Adding something to your chili, having a little bit of meat, and then mainly beans is always cheaper. And then using starches to stretch your meals, as long as you don't use too many, is also a way to reduce the cost of the meal overall. Then focusing on vegetables that are not too expensive. Broccoli is expensive, Brussels sprouts are expensive. So affordable vegetables that I try to use more often are carrots, onions, cabbage. Cabbage is great. It stretches meals and it can be used in so many diverse ways. Everything from sauerkraut to cabbage soup to bulking up a stew and then used in a salad even. Those are very filling. And frozen vegetables are sometimes cheaper, although I don't generally use those because I don't think they taste quite as good. But perhaps frozen peas, frozen corn are a good way to stretch a meal. Then using the whole ingredient, for example, if you buy celery and you use it in a dish like in a stew, sliced celery, then it's great to use the rest of it in a soup. You could have a soup container in your freezer where you put maybe lamb bones, leftover celery and carrot, leftover any vegetables that you think would enhance your soup. It's a great way to keep those and even to make stock from your freezer dish. Broccoli and cauliflower stems also work great in a soup because you blend it up and they bring that good flavor. Then snacks can be a big cost cutter. Making your own crackers, cheese crackers with salt, are very delicious and healthier and then cheaper than buying prepackaged snacks. Popcorn at home is better and cheaper. Homemade granola can be very expensive. Then freezing your fresh fruit before it gets old is always helpful. Freezing bananas that are getting towards their end is great for making future banana bread, banana muffins. Freezing bits of mango or peaches, nectarines, those are great for making pies or cobblers or for using in smoothies. And then growing your own herbs and vegetables can be so helpful. Having a bush with rosemary outside, some basil plants, perhaps some oregano, parsley is really helpful because it stops you having to buy the dried herbs or the fresh herbs regularly whenever you need them. But you can just pop out and get a sprig from your garden. Then also staying on top of your meals can save you money. You don't have to rush out at the last minute and get takeout or rush to the grocery store for some pre-frozen meals like I have to do now and then. It's really helpful to stay on top of things. And for me, that means having the meat that I need in advance for the week, having it in the freezer, and then having it in the fridge defrosted a couple of days in advance so that when I want to cook it, it's there. And even for me, that means having a couple of meals cooked in advance and put in the fridge. So I find roast lamb is better on the second day. I'll cook it in the crock pot, put the whole crock pot in the fridge if you have space, and then reheat it the next day in the crock pot on a low setting. Or I'll cook a corned beef or perhaps make some beef stroganoff, and those are very easy to heat in the oven a day later. And always knowing what I'm eating the next day really helps me to stay on top of things. But of course, there are always days when suddenly meals catch up with you and you realize you have nothing for lunch or dinner that day. And in those cases, I often do order something frozen from the grocery store. For me, the cheapest things would be something like cottage pie, which is usually cheaper than lasagna, or something like kebabs for the grill, sausages for the grill, and that's easy, or even hamburgers for the grill. That is a nice one that's not too expensive. Having good equipment also really helps save in the kitchen. I find that if I have and use my Instant Pot and my slow cooker effectively, then I don't end up with meat that's inedible and tough or some kind of failed meal, because I know what to use for each kind of meat and I know which ones work best in the crock pot, the roast lamb, the chicken. I know that beef often works best in my Instant Pot, whether it's beef stroganoff or short rib or roast beef, they all work best for me in the Instant Pot. And then I don't end up having to throw something out, which has definitely happened in the past when I've tried to do beef in the crock pot. So know what works for you in your kitchen and what's been a success for you in the past, and make sure that you have lots of those meal ingredients already. Another way to save is to shop what's in season, especially at farmers markets. Then you're paying the original prices, not the grocery store prices. And the fruits and vegetables that are in season will always be much cheaper than the imported ones. Often you'll find generic brands can be okay when money is tight, and you can get those instead of specific brands that you usually buy, whether it's pasta, rice, beans, any other grocery store items. Then sometimes you can think about the amount of meat and vegetables that you cook for your family. I often find I have a little bit left over. So, say sometimes for my family of 7, I'll be cooking 3 packs of chicken breasts. But then I decide, seeing as I usually have half of one left over, I'm going to just cook 2. So, I cook 2 packs of chicken breasts, and then that's what there is. And somehow people compensate. Maybe I'll add a sauce that doesn't cost too much more. And there's the rice, there's the vegetables, and then I've saved on the meat. And I don't have the leftovers, and everybody's satisfied. So just choosing something to do slightly less of than you usually do, you may find that you didn't need the extra anyway, and it works out. So an obvious one is limiting convenience foods and prepackaged foods, prepackaged snacks, and either going without or making something similar at home. One of the cheapest snacks, of course, is popcorn, because it's just endless. It lasts so long. If you know how to make it well in a pot with a bit of butter, it's delicious. And then not buying the things that you used to buy. So granola bars or store-bought granola itself, anything that you can actually do without. Try thinking of alternatives. It's also quite expensive to buy dried fruit. So something like raisins is better and cheaper than dried mango and dried pineapple, etc. One of my favorite snacks to make at home, dried fruit-wise, was dried apples. I say was because it was in the time when I had a dehydrator. It was really easy. You soak the apple slices in pineapple juice or apple juice to stop them going brown, and then you dehydrate them for about 12 hours on low. I think you can do this in the oven on the lowest setting for a few hours. It won't be as low as a dehydrator, but still it can be effective and much more delicious and cheaper than buying something like dried apple. And trying to make your eating out an occasion. So instead of just grabbing something as a takeout or from a restaurant because you're tired and then it's not great quality food and it costs you more, try to not eat out unless it's an occasion. So you decide you're going to eat out once a week or once every 2 weeks as a special family occasion. We dress up and we go to a nice restaurant. Then you really enjoy that, but it's not just eating out because you're on the run and you didn't plan well. So try to think what snacks are good in advance for when you're on the run, and then try to think how you can easily get those together. So if you have something in the fridge that you can grab to take with you. One of my favorite treats is a no-bake cheesecake that you can just spoon up into a little container and take with you, because it's a treat and it's a meal, because it's got a lot of good protein in there. I think my recipe is on the post for Easy Snacks for Moms. I think that's podcast number 4. And then there's some other ideas of easy snacks on there. Last money saving tip then is to use your leftovers. Sometimes we forget them in the fridge or in the freezer. So have a day when you dig in your freezer the night before to defrost stuff, or you grab all the things in your fridge to warm for lunch, and then you don't need to spend other money on that meal. Thanks for listening. I hope there were a few tips there that helped you a little bit. Enjoy your week. I'll see you next time.